And you can view the official language for those at elections.ucdavis.edu. That's also the place to vote. The Elections Committee will announce the results of the elections on Friday at noon on the website. So my first question for you, Brian, is what is the value of this vote and how does it differ from the other expressions of dissent that students have engaged in since the last summer?
Well, as far as expression, there's a diversity of tech. I mean, you can't just express everything through blocking the freeway. And I think a real democratic vote is more of a poll that you can point to and say this many people are actually opposed. You have a solid number, you have opposed to what's going on in the university. And I also think it raises awareness of the issue. Because of this, I was able to go into classrooms and say, hey, this is what's happening in our university. These are some of the problems, and then, will you sign this petition of no confidence? So I think it had an educational value. And also it has the value of we're going in the wrong direction and we need to stop, and it gets the message out. What was the other question?
I think you answered both of them.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
What's that?
So the wording in these resolutions is, I think, you could say is fairly ambiguous. There's not a lot of specific points of criticism. They're kind of more broad. Is there anything you talk about why you chose to go that route? Or do you disagree that they're specific?
Well, I mean, I thought they were pretty specific. They don't specifically say, like, for example, there was a UCLA report which said that administrative ranks have grown by 118% since 1997, and we could save $800 million if we just slowed that growth. We'd have $800 million more every year. I could have said that, or we could have said that in a resolution. We pointed to specific examples of where we could save money and things that we're not doing. But there's just so many things that you just start laundry listing all these different places where we could save or not cut or conflicts of interest, and it just gets a little bit tiresome. You may as well just say this isn't working and we're against it. It is a little bit ambiguous, but I think it's intentional.
Okay. So part of the resolution reads, the Regents of the University of California have made severe cuts in academic and related programs while ignoring student and faculty dissent. I'd like you to elaborate on this. First, what academic cuts have the Regents made?
Well, there have been a lot of academic cuts, and it's not as bad at Davis, but especially on the other campuses, and not as bad at Merced either, the other campuses, and there have been cuts at Davis, but like the major, there was a community studies major at Santa Cruz, which was cut completely, and then just funding for undergraduate education has been cut. Undergraduate class sizes are getting bigger, there's fewer TAs available. Kind of the usual.
Can it be argued that the individual campuses are responsible for directing their cuts towards academics rather than?
Right. Well, what happens with that is the Office of the President gives each campus a budget, and so the campus has to operate inside that budget. They don't really have a say in how much money they get to spend, which is actually why well, never mind. I won't go there. But they don't have so much of a say. They get a budget from the Office of the President, and they just operate within that. So I think it's the Office of the President that is responsible.
Okay. So another part of the resolution reads, the Regents of the University of California continue to discuss further tuition increases and budget cuts. Obviously, we all know there is still a large budget gap that needs to be bridged in order for the university to continue to function. So what's the matter with discussing tuition increases and budget cuts?
So I think background on that is tuition went up 32%. Well, it went up a lot in the winter quarter, and it's going up a lot more in the fall. It's going up another $500, I think. That's just the educational fee. And then there have also been a lot of cuts that have already been made, which, whether you like the cuts or not like the cuts, the UC is spending less money. And then on top of that, Governor Schwarzenegger's promised. Right now he's budgeted $350 million extra towards the UC over what was when the budget, in the state budget last year. And so when you start talking about further tuition increases and you set those tuition increases annually for the next 5 years, there seems to be a problem with that. Why isn't tuition going down, if anything? It seems like if we're getting more money from the state, if we're spending less money on education, why is tuition continuing to increase or projected to continue to increase? And if you read the report for the Commission on the Future, I mean, they actually say for the next 3 years, we assume, in all of our numbers, we assume that tuition will go up at the rate of 15% a year, and then after that it will continue at 7% a year. And I don't understand why that is.
I think one thing to point out, just in your answer there, is that there were a lot of temporary measures taken this year, such as the furlough, faculty and staff furlough program.
Which is going to end in September for the most part. Right.
So even though they're getting more funding from the state, some of that's being offset by...
Well, here's one of the problems with furloughs, since you brought it up. The UC estimates that they've saved about $7 million in furloughing and laying off some of the lowest paid workers, janitors, and et cetera. But they've spent about $9 million since the budget cut started on bonuses and increases in executive salaries. And that's according to AFSCME President, I forget her name, Harrison. Yeah. So that's just something, there's a lot of mispriorities, which I think are really, really blatant.
So the next part of the resolution reads, the Regents of the University of California have not allowed the student, staff, and faculty to have significant role in the decision-making process. Considering that there's a voting student member of the Board of Regents, the President UDOC met extensively with faculty representatives in formulating the furlough program this year. How would you define a sufficient role in the decision-making process?
How would I define a sufficient role? I mean, I think just listening. I mean, he's met with people, perhaps. He has this Commission for the Future, which goes out and meets with people for him. But they don't take back what is said. I mean, one of the things I think is rather obvious is that top administrative positions have grown at the rate of 118% since 1997, or between 1997 and 2007. And that cost the UC $800 million a year. If it had just grown at a normal rate, we'd have $800 million a year more in the budget. That's the entire crisis. I mean, that's the entire crisis. It just seems that, well, I mean, how would you define sufficient role? Yeah, I know I have to think about the rest of that and then get back to you.
I've talked to Chancellor Pataki about this, about why she thinks that is. And, she's only been here for less than a year, so I don't know how extensive her knowledge of why that is. But, I mean, one hypothesis that she offered was that in the past decade or 13 years, I think, for measuring since 1997, there has been much more demand for administrative services like sexual harassment training, sexual harassment education program, things like CAPS, all of the resource centers that we have on campus, all of the people who work at those, who staff those, are considered administrators. So, I mean, have you thought about that and you have a response to that?
The people who are running sexual education programs are not the top administrators I'm talking about. There's 3,650, I believe, people at the University of California who make over $200,000 a year. I'm guessing that the people who run the sex ed programs don't make that much. So that's not really who I'm focusing on. But while we're on Pataki, Mark Udop, I actually watched Mark Udop had